Take a look out your window for a second. There's something quiet and beautiful happening right now in the natural world. The frost is finally letting go of the earth, the soil is beginning to breathe again, and April is just waiting to burst through with that deep promise of a fresh start. But before we get swept up in the season, I have to stop and ask you something, and it might feel a little heavy. As we step across the threshold into this new month, what exactly are you carrying in your arms? More importantly, what are you making your children carry into this new season alongside you? We tend to look at months as just squares on a kitchen calendar, but for a family's heart, there's so much more. They're boundaries. They're these rare moments where we get to decide what stays behind and what moves forward. But I have to give you a warning today, one that most parents never even realize they need. Without even meaning to, you might be packing emotional luggage into your child's backpack, heavy, jagged pieces of stress that were never theirs to carry. You're letting the frustrations of March, the lingering anxieties of winter, and the shadows of your own past trail behind your kids right into April. Think back on how your house has felt lately. Has the air felt a bit thick? Has everything felt frantic, like everyone is just rushing from one fire to the next? We tell ourselves we're doing a good job as long as there's food on the table and the kids get to their games on time. But there's a hidden weight, a spiritual burden that moves from your shoulders to theirs every time you push down your own internal chaos instead of dealing with it. This isn't just another video on how to be a better parent. This is a wake-up call for your home. We're at a tipping point. If you let these specific struggles follow your kids into this new month, it's not just a rough patch anymore. You're actually handing them a blueprint for their own future. You're teaching them right now how to handle fear, how to view the world, and how to see God through the lens of your own unfinished battles. Spring is a metaphor for growth, but nothing grows well in poisoned soil. If your home is saturated with the leftovers of last month's anger or worry, your children are going to struggle to bloom. They'll spend all their energy trying to manage your moods instead of discovering their own hearts. They'll become experts at reading the weather of your face instead of learning to rest in the consistency of God's grace. Imagine a doorway. On one side is everything that's been dragging you down, the bills, the tension in your marriage, that bone-deep exhaustion from work. On the other side is April, full of resurrection power. Are you really going to drag that rusted chain of March through that door? Are you going to let your kids trip over it while they're trying to move forward? We have to stop the cycle right here. We're going to look at exactly what this hidden baggage is and how to make sure it stops at the border of this new month. Please stay with me, because what we're about to talk about could change the entire atmosphere of your home this spring. I want to speak to you heart to heart for a minute, from one parent to another. I know how tired you are. I know that by the time you finally sit down at the end of the day, your body feels like it's made of lead and your mind is just a blur of static. You aren't a bad parent for feeling this way. In fact, the reason you feel this weight so deeply is because you care so much. You want to provide, you want to protect, and you'd give anything to make sure your kids have a life that's a little softer and more joyful than the one you had. But let's talk about the real world grind. Imagine it's 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. The kitchen is a wreck, and you've already told your son to get his shoes on 5 times. Your head is spinning with that email from your boss or the fact that the grocery bill just keeps climbing. And then it happens. Your child spills their juice. It's a tiny thing, right? A total accident. But because your internal cup is already sloshing over with the stress of last month, you snap. You don't just wipe up the juice. You let out a sigh that feels like it carries 1,000 disappointments. You say something sharp, and your face clouds over with a darkness that has nothing to do with spilled juice and everything to do with your own fatigue. In that split second, your child isn't learning about being careful. They're learning that they are a burden. They're learning that their world is a fragile place where one small mistake can ruin the whole day. Or maybe you've been at the dinner table, but you weren't really there. You're sitting in the chair, but your spirit is miles away, chewing on an argument with your spouse, or wondering if you're failing at everything. You look up and see your daughter watching you. She's trying to catch your eye, trying to tell you something funny that happened at school. But you're spiritually offline. You're stuck in a fog of negativity that blurs the connection between you and the very person you love most in the world. Have you noticed your kids mirroring your own stress lately? Have you seen your own worried expression looking back at you from their little faces? It's a heartbreaking thing to realize, but when we're stuck in a cycle of struggle, our children become our mirrors. If we're restless, they get hyper. If we're withdrawn, they get clingy and anxious. It hurts to see our own demons showing up in their lives. I know the guilt that comes with this. I know what it's like to lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every mistake you made that day, and promising yourself you'll do better tomorrow. But then tomorrow comes, and that weight is still there. You're tired of being the tired parent. You're weary of the noise and the feeling that you're drowning, even when you're trying your absolute hardest. Please know that you are not alone. Every parent I know is wrestling with these same shadows. We live in a world that demands perfection, but never offers a place to rest. We're told to hustle and optimize, but no one tells us what to do with the raw, hurting parts of our souls. Your kids don't need a perfect parent. They don't need you to have a huge bank account or a spotless house. What they need is a parent who is present. They need a parent whose spirit isn't perpetually clouded by the storms of the last season. We're going to walk through how to clear that fog together. You deserve peace, and your children deserve a parent who can breathe again. The biggest danger we're facing as we move into this new month is something I call inherited anxiety. We live in a world where stress is like background radiation. It's always there, humming in the news and on our phones. But for a child, that's not just noise. It's the very frequency of their life. Your kids are emotional sponges. They don't just hear what you say, they absorb the way you feel. When you carry the anxieties of March into April, the fear that there won't be enough, the worry that you're falling behind, the dread of what might go wrong next, you're basically giving your kids a masterclass in how to be afraid. You're teaching them that the world is a place to be survived, not a place to be enjoyed. This creates a ripple effect that can change a child's whole personality. Think about a parent who's always looking 3 steps ahead, waiting for the next disaster to strike. To a child, that feels like total instability. If mom or dad is always worried about next, the child starts to feel like now isn't safe. This is exactly how a parent's stress over a mortgage or a job turns into a child's fear of the dark or a sudden panic about going to school. They can't understand your tax bracket or your office politics, so their little bodies translate your stress into the only thing they understand, a constant, shaky sense of fear. They become hyper-vigilant. They start watching your face to see if they're allowed to be happy today. They stop asking for what they need because they can see you're already full of trouble. This struggle cannot cross the line into April. April is supposed to be a spring cleaning for our nervous systems, not just our closets. If you keep carrying this anxiety, you're telling your kids that there's no such thing as a fresh start. You're teaching them that stress is a permanent roommate instead of a temporary guest. We try to justify it, don't we? We call it being responsible. We think if we worry enough, we can fix things. But let's be honest. Has worry ever solved a single problem in your house? Not once. All it's done is steal your joy and make your kids feel insecure. It makes the air in the house feel thin, like everyone is walking on eggshells, and the beauty of a new season gets smothered by the what-ifs of the old one. The real danger is that this anxiety becomes their baseline. Your kids will grow up thinking that living in a state of low-level panic is just normal. They'll enter adulthood looking for things to worry about because they were never taught how to sit in the stillness of God's provision. They'll carry your march into their own future Aprils long after they've moved out of your house. We have to stop that transmission right now. Our peace is the greatest inheritance we can give them, not a house or a car, but a heart that knows how to rest. I don't want to leave you under the weight of all that. If we're going to talk about the problem, we have to talk about the way out. And the good news is, you don't need to move to the mountains or quit your job to change the atmosphere of your home. You just need a small shift, a simple daily habit that acts as a circuit breaker for all that stress. I want to introduce you to something I call the Home Peace Protocol. It's a practical way to make sure the junk from the outside world and the baggage from last month doesn't settle in your living room. Think about your daily transitions. Maybe you're coming home from a long shift, or you're just finishing up a stressful day of working from home. Before you interact with your kids, I want you to try a threshold pause. Don't walk through that door while you're still mentally wrestling with March. Stop for 60 seconds. Literally shake your hands out to let go of the tension. Remind yourself, the person my kids see in the next 5 minutes will set the tone for their entire night. We often fail as parents, not because we're bad people, but because we don't transition well. We bring that warrior energy from work right into the sanctuary of our homes. For the month of April, I want you to try a new ritual. When you see your kids for the first time in the morning or when you get home, make a rule. The first words out of your mouth cannot be a directive. No, where are your shoes? Or did you do your chores? Instead, make those first 60 seconds about nothing but connection. A long hug, a hand on their shoulder, a look that says, I see you, and I'm so glad you're mine. This feels almost too simple, but it's a radical way to tell the spirit of stress that it's not welcome here. You can also try an evening reset. Before bed, take 5 minutes to talk as a family about one thing that felt heavy that day. Model it for them. Say, I felt really frustrated at work today, but I'm leaving that frustration in today. I'm not bringing it into tomorrow. When you do that, you're giving them the tools to handle their own lives. You're showing them that emotions are things we process, not things we have to wear like a heavy coat. And finally, change the audio of your house. In April, be intentional about what fills the silence. Is it the loud, angry noise of the news? Or is it something peaceful? Maybe some soft music, or just the sound of real conversation. The atmosphere of a room is real. If you fill it with peace, the struggles of the past won't have any room to breathe. These shifts are small, but they build a peace wall around your kids. You're architecting a new month, one 5-minute pause at a time. To show you how this actually looks in real life, I want to tell you about a family I know. Let's call them the Millers. From the outside, they looked like they had it all together. Nice house, kids in honors classes, very active in the community. But inside that house, there was a silent storm brewing. The dad, David, was a high achiever, but he'd had a brutal start to the year. His company was restructuring, and he was fighting every day just to keep his job. He didn't tell the kids. He didn't want to worry them. But David was bringing March into every single room he walked into. He'd come home, sit at the kitchen island, and stare at his phone with his jaw clenched so tight it looked like stone. His youngest son, Leo, who was only 8, started getting tummy aches every single morning before school. He became quiet and stopped playing with his friends. He kept asking his mom, "Is Daddy mad at me?" This is the perfect example of inherited struggle. David thought he was being a strong provider by keeping his mouth shut. But because he hadn't dealt with his own anxiety, he was radiating it. The silent storm in David's heart was turning into a physical illness in his son's body. The struggle was following Leo into every new day. The turning point came when David realized his silence wasn't protection, it was a wall. He started taking 10 minutes to sit in his car before going inside, listening to a certain song, and consciously handing over his work burdens to God. But the biggest change happened when he sat Leo down. He didn't give him all the corporate details, but he gave him the emotional truth. He said, "Leo, Daddy has been a little worried about work lately. Sometimes that makes my face look grumpy, and it makes me very quiet. But I want you to know it has nothing to do with you. You're my joy, and I'm learning how to leave my work worries at the door so I can be here with you." The change was almost instant. Leo's tummy aches were gone within a week. Why? Because the threat had a name and a place, and it wasn't him. The silent storm was gone, and the open sky was back. This story is a reminder that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest and intentional. You can change the atmosphere of your home tonight just by admitting what you're carrying and deciding to set it down. As we go a bit deeper into this warning, we have to look at two other struggles that are a little more subtle but just as dangerous: the April bloom trap of comparison and the desert of spiritual stagnation. These are the things that don't just make us tired, they make us feel hollow. Let's talk about that April bloom trap. In nature, everything grows at its own pace. Some flowers are up early, and some take weeks of rain before you see anything. As parents, we fall into this trap of comparative growth. We look at the neighbor's kid or those perfect families on social media, and we start measuring our own children against a curated lie. If you let that comparison follow your kids into April, you're poisoning their self-worth. You're teaching them that their value is relative, that they're only good if they're better than someone else. You start pushing them to bloom on your schedule instead of God's. This creates a home full of performance pressure, where your kids feel like your love is tied to their grades or their trophies. Comparison is a leftover from the winter of the soul, a time when we felt not enough, so we tried to find worth by outrunning others. In April, we have to leave that behind. Your child is a unique creation. When you stop comparing, you give them the oxygen they need to actually grow. You stop being a judge and start being a gardener. A gardener doesn't yell at a plant for not growing fast enough. They just make sure the soil is good and trust the process. Then there's spiritual stagnation, or just going through the motions. This is when family life becomes a checklist. You go to church, you say a quick grace, maybe read a story, but there's no heart in it. You're spiritually dry. If you carry that into April, you're teaching your kids that faith is a chore, not a relationship. You're showing them a version of God that has no power to actually change a life. In a month that's all about the resurrection, life winning over death, it's a tragedy to live like a spiritual zombie. This usually happens because we get so caught up in the logistics of parenting that we forget the legacy. We're so busy managing their schedules that we forget to nurture their spirits. We talk about God, but we forget to talk to Him as a family. The long-term cost is huge. A child raised in comparison will never feel like enough as an adult. A child raised in stagnation will walk away from faith the second it gets inconvenient, because they never saw it bring you any real life or joy. We have to pull these thorns out of the soil this April. To really give you the strength to hear this warning, we have to look at the wisdom that never changes. The struggles we've talked about, the anxiety, the comparison, they aren't new, but the solution is just as ancient. Look at Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 to 23. It says, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." Just think about that. New every morning. God doesn't ask you to carry March into April. He doesn't even ask you to carry yesterday's failures into today. He gives you a fresh supply of mercy at every single sunrise. If the Creator of the world gives you a clean slate every day, why are we so afraid to give one to ourselves and our kids? April is basically a physical version of that verse. It's the earth itself shouting that God is the God of the new. There's also that famous verse in Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. In the original Hebrew, that phrase, train up, carries the idea of creating a thirst. Your job this month is to create a thirst in your kids, not for success, but for peace and for God. You do that by the atmosphere you create. If you live in anxiety, you're training them to be thirsty for worry. If you live in grace, you're training them to be thirsty for mercy. This warning is a biblical one. All through the Bible, God told his people not to look back at the familiar pains of the past. He was always calling them into a land of promise. Your family's April is a land of promise. It's a place where you can live a different kind of life. Finally, remember Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Transformation doesn't happen by trying harder. It happens by renewing. This April, your mission is the renewal of the family mind. You have the authority to set the spiritual temperature of your home. You aren't a victim of your past. You are a steward of your children's future. Hold on to that truth, and those old struggles will lose their grip on you. We've covered a lot today. We've looked at the silent storm of anxiety, the thorns of comparison, and that peace protocol that can change everything. As we wrap up, I want you to see this clearly. April isn't just another page on the calendar. It's a line in the sand. You've been given this warning not to make you feel bad, but to move you to action. You have the power to say, the struggle stops here. You can decide right now that the version of your kids that walks through the next 30 days will be unburdened by your March baggage. You can give them the gift of a parent who is present, at peace, and rooted in God's new mercies. I want to commission you today. You are the gatekeeper of your home. You decide what gets in and what stays out. This April, be a vigilant gatekeeper. Protect your children's joy. Guard their sense of safety. Fight for the peace of your house like their future depends on it, because in so many ways, it really does. But you don't have to do it alone. We're a community of parents all trying to train up our kids in a world that's trying to tear them